All right, it is time to Bleav in Vikings. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Wabshall. It's Thursday, August 1st, and we are squarely entrenched in the dog days of summer and therefore the dog days of NFL training camps across the United States of America. Excited to continue this conversation with you guys about the Minnesota Vikings, which we do every single day here on Bleav in Vikings. And to help us do that today, we have a very special guest. I'm excited to bring him in a moment. It's Brandon Brown, someone who's been on the University of Michigan Wolverines football beat for a decade, who's covered the University of Michigan Wolverines football program from top to bottom via the written word, via podcasts, radio interviews, TV, etc. So excited to bring him in and get his perspective on now Vikings quarterback JJ McCarthy. But first, though, let's take care of some business. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. And right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to their online casino. Get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of their over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code Bleav, BLEAV. Use promo code Bleav for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online. The game starts here. And our conversation with Brandon Brown starts right here. He's going to be the host of the Bleav in Michigan podcast with former Wolverines football player Thomas Gines. You can find him on X/Twitter at BSB_Wolverine. You can find him on Bleav in Vikings right now. Hey, Brandon, welcome in, man. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. Quite an intro. I'm ready, man. That was pretty.
Right.
That was very, very official. I'm ready to roll.
All right. Yeah, this is official, man. People come here because they want to know about the Minnesota Vikings, so we get some of that business knocked out right away. We try to keep the energy high here, and then we bring in really smart, sharp football minds to enhance our conversation. That's why you're here. So I'm excited for you to help us out with that. And, obviously we're going to get into JJ McCarthy. That's been the A topic for the Vikings since the draft, through the offseason program, and even now during training camp. But as folks are going to listen to you here for the next 30 minutes or so, I want them to understand just exactly who they're listening to. So tell us a little bit about your background and lend some obviously well-earned credibility, but lend some context to that, your detail and your experience with the Wolverines and with some of the players there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for the platform. Thank you for letting me join you today and talk a little football. By the way, first preseason football, like it's here, right? Football is back.
Yeah.
Every weekend from now until February 10th, like awesome.
Yeah.
So what a great day to come back and start talking some ball a little bit. But no, I was actually a teacher and a coached some football, coached some basketball, taught for 8 years, and then started a website covering it. I look back on it now, it was so bad. My website was like just some little blog thing I was doing for fun. I was living in South Carolina, started this blog on Michigan, really in the recruiting world like that. I've always been really into recruiting. And so that was kind of where I got my foot in the door. And then the website grew and grew, and I started to make some inroads and start to get the competition to notice me. That's really how it happened. And then rivals reached out to me and hired me full-time to cover recruiting for Michigan, to cover Michigan recruiting. So moved back to the state of Michigan where I was born and raised in 2014. And yeah, been on the beat ever since. For the first 4 or 5 years, it was mostly recruiting. It's all hands on deck, obviously, during football season. So I'd be at the games and I would do some sideline stuff. I did some photography stuff. And then, about halfway through that decade, I was switched over to covering the team completely, and did that for the last 4 or 5 years at Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. So, yeah, 10 years on the beat. I told you before we got going here, I was there for the entirety of Jim Harbaugh. Brady Hoke's last year was my first year on the beat. Harbaugh came in, and obviously now he's back in the NFL with the Chargers. So, yeah, I was there for the ups, the downs, the way up of last year, and it's been an incredible 10 years of covering that team, a team I grew up rooting for. And then you got to put the journalism hat on a little bit and get a little bit more take the emotion out of it. But yeah, 10 years in, man, I never thought I would be doing that, and it's been a blessing. And obviously last year was incredible. 15-0 national title, and watching JJ do his thing there for Michigan.
Yeah, and Vikings fans now obviously hoping he can do his thing for
Mhm.
their team, for the Minnesota Vikings. And you've covered a lot of players on a lot of teams, so it's not like you're sitting there on the edge of your seat following JJ McCarthy's progress every single day. But if anyone's been following it, they know that since training camp has started, Brandon, you know, I don't think anything monumental has changed or
Mhm.
shifted, but I do think the general understanding was the intention here is for Sam Darnold to be the Vikings starter and for JJ McCarthy to develop underneath him and for the Vikings to slowly bring him along.
Mhm.
But I think you out of respect for competition and respect for JJ McCarthy, you had to leave the door slightly cracked open to the possibility that JJ could be the starter as soon as week 1. And I think if that reality were to happen, so far this is what it would look like in training camp. And what I mean by that is you're at best for Darnold, it's an even race between the two. And I
Mhm.
think if you're a veteran quarterback who should be a starter, you would be leading this competition head and shoulders. And that's just
Mhm.
not happening. So given what you know about JJ McCarthy, given what you might project him to be, does that surprise you that he's in the mix here to maybe play as soon as his rookie season?
No, it doesn't. And I'll preface this by saying I've kind of been like a weird Sam Darnold fan. Like I think he's gotten a raw deal ever since he came into the NFL. I think he's better than what he's done. So if he ends up being the guy with all the weapons that the Vikings have, like I think he could be serviceable or better, like better than he's been. So I'll start
Sure.
there. But then with JJ, I mean the kid, I call him the kid. He's he's an
Hmm.
NFL quarterback now. The young man, JJ,
Yeah.
engaged. He's a grown up now at this point. But no, he's just been a winner at every single level that he's been at. He's incredibly driven. He's got all the talent in the world. Obviously, you can see that when you put the tape on, and he's drafted in the top 15. Like that's because he's really good at football. But he just has a drive to be great. He works incredibly hard. He's every single thing you would want for a quarterback in the face of your franchise and the leader of your program and a presence in the locker room and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, he's young and he's a rookie and he's behind a veteran quarterback in Sam Darnold right now, but he just always has been that guy. State championship as a sophomore in high school in Illinois, and then a national championship at IMG Academy as a senior in high school, and then a national champion at Michigan. Like he just succeeds. He just wins. He just does what he's supposed to do. And that's the one thing at Michigan. People would say he didn't throw it enough, but I mean, you can go to any game that he had and find a
Hmm.
wow throw. I mean, every game he had a wow throw, an NFL throw, a big time arm throw. And so the talent's there, the drive is there, the work ethic is there. So no, it wouldn't, just in terms of the actual development of the race, not even really talking about the physical abilities between the two quarterbacks. No, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if he did everything he needed to do to take over that job.
Yeah, and I truly think that this has gone the way Kevin O'Connell envisioned. I don't think anything has surprised him so far.
Mm-hmm.
It's just from the public standpoint, you're reacting to things in a vacuum, and you can tend to overreact when that happens, right? You see a highlight from a fan's Twitter account who's
Mm-hmm.
watching practice, and it's McCarthy making an across the field throw just on a dot, and and I think people want to get to the point where they are predicting him to be the starter. So there's a little bit of manifest destiny there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's also just a credit to JJ McCarthy. Like he seems to have like a charisma about him. He seems to have something where it's like even if you were a detractor, you can't help but like come off of that position and maybe not root for him, but acknowledge the
Mm-hmm.
positivity around him.
There's no doubt. It's like I've said this so many times, and I've known, again, going back to my roots covering recruiting. I've known JJ since he was in ninth grade. Like I've covered him all the way through his
Yeah.
recruitment by Michigan, and then like I'm just a random guy on the beat. Yes, I did get to know him a little bit when he was in high school, but every time I ever saw him at anything, I mean, he could be, coming off the bus, getting ready to go in to play Penn State. He'd come over to me and dap me up, bro. Like, how you doing, Brandon? Like,
Yeah.
you don't need to do that, dude. I'm just here doing
Yeah.
my job. But it's to the point where it's almost like there's no way that can be real. He's not really like that all the time, but he is. He genuinely is, like you said, just a positive presence. He's got it all between the ears when it comes to the learning and just the mental makeup of what you want in a quarterback and a leader. And he's great to his teammates, and he really doesn't care if he gets the glory. I mean, you don't have to look any farther than what he did at Michigan. I mean, it was a lot of handing the ball off and a lot of just doing what the team needed him to do to move the ball and win games. I mean, he didn't throw it as much as Caleb Williams or Drake May or some of those other guys that went in the draft, and that's just how he is. So he'll do whatever you ask him to do. He's going to do it at a high level. And yeah, people like Michigan State and Ohio State fans will probably never say it, but just about everybody else would be like, yeah, I like that kid. I do. I like what he's about. I like how he conducts himself, and it's impossible not to root for him. It really is. Vikings fans will love him. They'll love him from the first time they ever see him or hear him talk. I don't know if he's done any of that really yet or not, but he's a really, really likable guy.
No, you're right. They have. He's charismatic and
Yeah.
gregarious, and people love him. He's affable, the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about during seasons, especially the last two, and maybe even more so just last year. Were there, again, detractors, critics, critical thinkers who would question McCarthy or Harbaugh or the offensive coordinator on just like, I know you guys are undefeated, blah, 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 but, JJ's not doing much. Like, how did Harbaugh and McCarthy handle that?
You heard it, but it's real hard to ask that question when you win by 30. It's real hard to. It's working. Everything worked.
Yeah.
They didn't lose last year. They only lost once the year before that until the playoff. I mean, like, it's hard to, because I would find myself doing that. I'm like, I'm 40. I'm a video game kid. I'm like, dude, air it out, throw the ball, throw it deep. But like, then you look up and they won by 27. It's like, what am I doing? Why am I criticizing what just worked so well? So there was some of that. I mean, because you could see the arm talent, and they had some really good receivers there for JJ's career. And you just wondered, like, what would he look like if he played at USC, or what would he look like if he played at Tennessee, where they really throw it around the yard? But those teams didn't go 15-0, and Michigan did. So it's just one of those things where it would come up. You wondered a little bit, but you could not challenge what they were doing and the results that they were getting. So it was, if that argument came up, it was squashed pretty quick. I mean, it just was. There wasn't much of a leg to stand on.
How about in the pre-draft process? Was McCarthy's pro day maybe an eye-opener for some people? Because perhaps, now granted, pro days are designed, they're engineered to make everyone look good, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you should never have a bad pro day. But do you think that as pro days go, McCarthy's was as important really as they get? Because perhaps he was able to demonstrate some things on the field that day to coaches and scouts that Harbaugh didn't ask him to demonstrate on a consistent basis in games.
That's probably fair. I'd never really thought about it from that angle. But like I said, I mean, even though he didn't throw it that much in terms of actual attempts, or maybe, there's so many analytics now. I mean, I don't know how many shots he took down, 40 yards down the field. I know it wasn't a lot. It wasn't. But every single game, there were a handful of throws where it's like, that's all I need to see. Like, that's it. I'll draft him off of that throw alone, and then you learn about him as a person and how he works and all the other stuff, the intangibles, and it's like it's a no brainer. But in terms of his pro day, I mean, they're all the NFL execs are there, the coaches, whoever else, and they can have him do this, have him do that, and so there's a little bit more of an involvement there. And if you really had any question about, well, can he roll out to his right and uncork at 45? Can he go to his left and put it on a rope? I mean, you can see that in the tape a little bit, but you could see it in person. You can see how the ball jumps off of his arm. I mean, he's not as big as some of these other guys. I think he ended up getting up to maybe 215 or 218 or something, which is a really good weight for him, I think, because he's not the biggest framed guy in the world. But he had the second fastest throw behind only Joe Milton at the combine, when Joe Milton's, a tight end size, 6'5", 250. So he's got a very live and electric arm. And again, I think you see that on the tape. But that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about, when you get drafted in the top 15, like, clearly the guy, the team saw what they needed to see. I don't know if it was maybe at his pro day, or if it was, how he did in the interview process or the whiteboard or any of that stuff. But yeah, that makes sense. I mean, some of the things that he didn't do on a down in, down out basis at Michigan in games, you could ask him to do that in that pro day, and I'm sure plenty of people came away impressed. And obviously, his draft position proves that.
Yeah, it does. And a lot of quarterbacks went in this draft, and a lot went early, and a handful went ahead of McCarthy, and some we expected, some we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I would, on a tangent here, I'd love to know, for those who didn't believe in him as a top half of the first round quarterback, I'd love to know why that is,
Mm-hmm.
because I try to be an objective observer of the whole thing, and I'm not saying he's the next Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, but I just don't know what it would be,
Yeah.
because I think there's volume of throws and maybe some stats that he's short on from
Mm-hmm.
game action. But again, it's kind of like when college teams have they don't have any strong victories, and so they aren't rated as high in the polls. It's like we can only beat who is on our schedule.
Right.
Like, we can't on a Wednesday afternoon go down to Tuscaloosa and challenge Alabama. Like, they're just not on our schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And so JJ McCarthy you would say, I'm sorry, I have, 14 40 plus yard throws, and that's not as many as Caleb Williams. He's got 56, but like, my coach didn't ask me to do that. And that's why I
Mm-hmm.
think the pro day is an important moment for someone like JJ McCarthy in the draft process. But yeah, I'd be curious to know what some of the detractors or non-believers would have said about McCarthy, because I think it's hard to poke holes in his resume and
Yeah.
in him as a prospect at the pro level.
And it's if there, like you said, if there is maybe a shortcoming, say it's volume in throws or stats, I guess, but that's not even really on him. Like, it's not because of
That's
he
right.
wasn't
Yeah.
able to do it. He just didn't have to do it. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'd come back immediately with like, well, I'm the quarterback. Like, and look how I handled that. I look like there's so many guys who would play the diva card and not be like, I'm not handing the
Hmm.
ball off to Blake Corum 30 times. Like, why would I do that? I'm the QB. And he
Yep.
just took it in stride, loved it all, and just won. He just won every
Yeah.
game.
I got a couple of other kind of in the weeds questions about him that you're perfect for, because you were on the beat there. Um, how did Harbaugh and JJ McCarthy describe the autonomy that JJ had at the line, and his ability to get the offense in and out of plays, and just sort of the cerebral part of the job?
Yeah, I think they didn't do it a ton. I mean, JJ would talk about making sure that guys were in the right spot, and that
Hmm.
I'm be honest, he was blessed with some of the brightest and best centers during
Oh,
like, he
really?
had Oluwatimi, who was a transfer from Virginia, super smart kid, grad transfer, went on to the NFL, and then last
Hmm.
year, his name is escaping me, but he came from Stanford, another super smart guy, and he had veteran linemen. I mean, JJ had he had it made. When you're a quarterback and you can walk up there and see those guys and those veterans and those dudes who have played a lot of games together, it makes your job easier. But there was a lot of communication between JJ and the centers. I know that was something that they talked about a lot, and making sure that the line was picking up what they were supposed to pick up. And they would check. They would do the check with me on the sideline stuff too, a little bit here and there. But Michigan was, more of that. Like, they didn't huddle, but they were a little slower. They were a little more methodical. They would come up to the line. They would be able to see. The coaches would be able to see. But JJ, especially by this last year, his junior season, when he was the guy and they were poised to make a championship run. I mean, it was his team, and everybody, he might not have, again, put up the big gaudy numbers, but everybody looked to him for that leadership. And if he needed to make a check, he certainly had the ability to do that. But I
Sure.
think I think Michigan was just so sound and steady in what they did. I don't know if Harbaugh would ever admit it. I don't think they changed much when they got to the line. I think they were like, "This is what we're going to do. You're not going to stop it, and we're just going to run it." I really think that, if you could go across the board to all the teams in the country, like, the percentage of plays that were changed once you came to the line, I would bet a lot of money on Michigan being at the one of the lowest teams in the country.
Sure.
I just don't think they had to do it very much. And again, there's another knock, but it's not a knock. Like, if you just don't ask him to do that, it's not really on him. But I really don't think he had to do it all that much, if I'm being
Well,
honest.
yeah. Well, and the other way to look at that, Brandon, is I've been around plenty of coaches who say that guy changes the plays too much.
Yeah, Yeah, I
like
mean,
I called
quarterbacks can.
this,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I called this for a reason. He's got autonomy to get us in and out of bad plays, but he does it too much. He
Yeah.
changes his into passes too much, right? So, there's a flip side to that as well.
And JJ, he knew who he had standing over there. Like, that's Jim
Yeah.
Harbaugh, man. Like, he
Oh
he
yeah.
knows the position. He knows. Yeah. So I truly don't think it was often, but I know that JJ had the ability to do it and certainly knew what to do. I just don't think he had to do it very often. It's not something that Michigan's offense leaned on.
Yep. So again, too, Brandon, in the pre-draft process, where there's an absence of evidence in like the physical throws and the volume of throws, I think the pro day was where McCarthy could sort of rebut that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think in the absence of lots of gamesmanship at the line of scrimmage, those private interviews that the players do with teams at the
Mm-hmm.
combine, pro days, or visits, or top 30 visits, that's an opportunity for JJ McCarthy and others to sort of demonstrate that acumen and that headiness is in
Mm-hmm.
those meetings. And I don't know if you watched it or not, but HBO did Hard Knocks offseason with the New York Giants. And
Mm-hmm.
what they showed in those meetings that the GM and the head coach had with the quarterback prospects is what happens. I've been in there myself and have seen them, and there's no hiding in those rooms. If you don't know ball, you're in there with the head coach and the offensive coordinator. If you don't know ball, you are going to be exposed in those
Mm-hmm.
meetings. And I think that Kevin O'Connell, Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell, is going to have a very high standard of what he
Mm-hmm.
expects on the mental side from his starting quarterback. And so for McCarthy to end up being the Vikings first round pick, that tells me that he passed that part of the test. Knowing Harbaugh how you do, I bet you that was so tough for him to be in a position basically to not be able to take his quarterback. I mean, he's got Justin Herbert, so it's not
Yeah.
even a discussion. You're nuts to think that McCarthy would come in and beat him out. You're nuts to really want to trade Justin Herbert away. Like,
Right.
this is a big reason why you took the job, but I bet it was still hard for him to not take JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it wasn't a need. I mean,
Yeah.
he's there's a lot of new faces in with the Chargers and top to bottom. I mean, the whole he Jim Harbaugh brought a lot of his staff from Michigan to the Chargers, so there's a lot of
Yeah.
new faces on the staff and on the roster. Some guys who have been with the Chargers for a long time are no longer there. So yeah, I mean, that's what made that job attractive, I think, to Jim Harbaugh was, well, I got my QB for the next 10 years. Let's go. They have JJ would be great, and he did end up drafting a couple of his guys from Michigan, but not
Mhm.
JJ. And position wise too, I don't remember exactly where the Chargers drafted, but later than what it looked like it was going to be for JJ. So yeah, they had a great rapport. I mean, they did. JJ would take up for Harbaugh. This last year was certainly a tough one for Harbaugh, and a lot of the stuff that was talked about in the media, and a lot of stuff that JJ had to talk about, whether that didn't have anything to do with what was going on the field. And
Mhm.
he always had Harbaugh's back. They always had a really good relationship. I mean, I know everybody has seen the pounding on his head and all the
Oh
stuff that
yeah.
Harbaugh did before the game, and that's just Harbaugh. That's Harbaugh being Harbaugh. It's funny you said how well I know Jim Harbaugh. I'm like, well, let's pump the brakes. I don't know if anybody knows Jim Harbaugh that well, to be honest, but no, yeah,
Good point.
seeing it up close at least though, and how they interacted, and yeah, I'm sure he would love to have JJ for a decade in the NFL
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
had such success together. But no, not
Yeah.
necessary with LA.
Yeah. Well, and I've been around head coaches too for a long time, and yeah, they've got their guard up, and
Mm.
and no one truly gets to know them really well just by being around them. But when you're around a program or a team and a coach for a long time, you pick up on their dialogue, the words they use, the rhetoric, their values, and all of that. And I think it was obvious. You could see the affinity that Jim Harbaugh
Mhm.
had for JJ McCarthy, and
Yeah.
that's why when I heard Jim Harbaugh continuously say, I think he's the best quarterback in the draft, he should be the first quarterback taken, he's the best
Mhm.
quarterback in Michigan history, that can strike you as hyperbolic if you don't critically analyze the situation. But when you really think about who Jim Harbaugh is, he doesn't have
No.
to go that far about JJ McCarthy, and he did. And for him to do that tells me a lot about McCarthy.
Yeah, Well, first of all, he's not wrong. I mean, again, statistically, you nitpick a little bit here. And there's some of the passing records that still stand at Michigan. You're like, wow, what year is it? They haven't had, anyway,
Yeah.
25 touchdowns is the record at Michigan still. That's crazy. Like,
That is
I
crazy.
thought JJ would shatter that as this full-time starter. And again, he didn't. I think he got close to it. But
Yeah.
27-1 as a starter, 15-0 national title. I mean, like, that's as impressive as any resume any college quarterback's going to have. And you're right. I mean, he repeatedly said it too. It wasn't like it was a one-off thing and it just kind of came out. Like, he went back to the well a lot and said it over and over and over again. And he believed that strongly in what JJ was about and what he'd be able to do. And JJ did. He climbed boards. I mean, there was some talk for a while. Maybe he's the second quarterback taken. I mean, there were some people who were really thinking that was possible. With New England and some of the other teams, Atlanta, I know in the top 10 as well, they went in a different direction. But yeah, I mean, Jim Harbaugh certainly propped JJ up, but it wasn't just to prop him up. Like, he didn't need to do it. JJ was going to be drafted high anyway, but that's how Harbaugh really felt about his guy.
Yeah, this is one of those deals, Brandon, where if McCarthy pans out and is a good pro for the Vikings, I think you look back on it and we'll see how the other quarterbacks who were taken pan out, right? I mean, Atlanta took Penix, the Patriots took May, the Commanders took Daniels, obviously the Bears took Caleb Williams, so you can't really blame them. But when you look at some other teams, the Saints could have jumped the Vikings for McCarthy. The Broncos could have jumped the Vikings for McCarthy. The Jets need to plan for the future after Aaron Rodgers. I'm not sure where Will Levis is going to be 2 years from now. So the Titans were a candidate. The Giants were certainly a candidate at 6. I mean, there's a lot of teams that were in position to beat the Vikings for McCarthy and chose not to do it. And so they might be right or the Vikings might be right. We'll find out. But either way, this is a draft class of quarterbacks that we're definitely going to be able to look back on in 5 seasons and start like pinpointing teams who made mistakes either in going up for those guys to get them or in not going up for those guys to get them. So that'll be fun to watch.
I'm actually curious. Something you brought up earlier as a guy who focuses more on the NFL. What do you think was the reason for those teams passing on McCarthy? Because like we talked about, like what would be the holes you could poke into the argument for taking him? I don't know, 5 or 8 or 9 or wherever some of those other quarterbacks did go. If I don't remember the exact position, but
I think it's a good question. I think it's a combination of the amount of quarterbacks that were going to go in the top 12 or 14. It's like, okay, well, a couple of these are probably going to be good, but there's no way all of them are going to be good. So we like Williams, we like May, and we like Penix. So all those guys are gone. Well, we're not going to take McCarthy. He's the 4th guy on our list. So are we really going to take the 4th quarterback on our list over the number 2 left tackle on our list? So I think they got uneasy that way. And then I'm pretty sure of that. And then another one I would guess on in combination with that is, and this is not entirely fair, but I think something about his stature and his size physically, I think might have, because a lot of times, I don't want this to sound too critical, but like GMs, scouts, and programs, they've got these parameters in place, like physical measurements for positions. And if you're outside of that measurement, like we got to have a left tackle that's X arm length and X hand size. And if he doesn't have that, then we're knocking him down 30 picks or 25 picks, right? So I think McCarthy may have been short in some of those areas. And so that in combination with, he's the 4th quarterback on our board. Are we really going to take him instead of our 2nd left tackle? I think that maybe, but added up to work against McCarthy. But I'm with you. I wouldn't have been surprised had Washington taken him or New England taken him at 2 or 3. And I do not root against Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. In fact, I like them. I watched, again, the Hart offseason with the New York Giants. I think they're a very likable organization and people there. But I'd rather have McCarthy than Daniel Jones. So and we'll see. I could be wrong about this, but I'm more in the McCarthy camp than I am not in the JJ McCarthy camp. So I think teams are going to regret passing on him.
Yeah, it's just an interesting topic. I think you're right. Like I said, he's not the, you stand next to him. he's not like a hulking big dude. His
Right.
frame's not real big. I mean, he's north of 210. I mean, he's not small, but yeah, I think you're right. And I remember, and I mean, it might as well be ancient history at this point, the way guys develop once they get to college, and some of these guys put on
Hmm.
80 pounds, like, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
remember when he was a recruit and he was borderline 5-star. Michigan was all in on him, and I went to like a Rivals 5-star thing, and I'm like, that guy, like, he's little, like, he's a little guy, and he's certainly developed since then, but you could see it then. He didn't have the typical 5-star, big old
Yeah.
6'3", 200, 215 in high school. um but again, put the tape on, watch the throw, watch the athleticism, watch the wins. It's hard to, well, he's 211, we'd like him to be 221. Like, does that matter? I don't know, but
Ah,
it is an interesting point, and it's probably, yeah, it probably factors in for some of those teams.
yep. Brandon, I think it matters more than zero, but I don't think it matters so much that I would turn my back
That's
on
fair.
a guy who looks like JJ McCarthy looks on the field.
Yep.
I mean, so again, you and I are sort of in the same camp there.
Hmm.
And only time will tell. And, I think we're going to find out pretty quickly how well McCarthy can play, because I think if he's not the week one starter, I still think he's going to play as a rookie. Whether it's in relief of Darnold, whether he replaces Darnold, whether he finishes games for Darnold, no matter how you slice it, I think McCarthy's going to be out there playing this year, and then we'll get to start judging him and analyzing him, and then I fully expect he'll be the number one quarterback when the offseason program begins in 2025. So what I would like to do is keep you on speed dial, so we can bring you into the show and keep talking about him, because I think you're as informed and equipped to talk about him as anyone. So I'd love to keep you in our orbit and have you back on the show.
Absolutely, I come back anytime. Yeah, I mean, it's fun. New quarterbacks for a team is fun. It's it's going to
Yeah.
go one way or the other, and fans are going to be invested. So yeah, I'm here to talk about JJ whenever you need it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Brandon. And again, for everyone listening, it's Bleav in Michigan with Thomas Gines and Brandon. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that as they begin recording and dropping episodes. Also, you can find Brandon on X at BSB_Wolverine. And there may be some additional work for Brandon or some changes. So make sure you stay tuned to Brandon for more when you want to hear about JJ McCarthy or the University of Michigan, whatever. Brandon's got your back for that. So again, Brandon, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Bleav in Vikings. We thank you all for listening, and we remind you to like, subscribe, and follow to Bleav in Vikings with Wabi. We are where you find all your other favorite podcasts. We're on all the major podcasting platforms and networks, so find us there. Once you do, you can keep believing in the Vikings. See you next time.